Hello and welcome. This is Business Edge right here on News Central. I'm Tolulokpe Adileru Balogun. We'll get into the headlines in just a moment, but to kick off this show, let's take a quick look at how the stock markets, both here on the continent and internationally, are performing. I'll be right back. Thank you so much for staying with us. Our headlines today. President Buhari in Nigeria inaugurates Treasury Portal. And Africans traveling to Nigeria to get visa on arrival. We'll get into the details of these stories with my guests right here on Business Edge. Again, welcome to the show. So before we get into an introduction of the stories, let's give you, of course, an introduction of my guest. I have joining me in the studio the Chief Executive Officer of Graham Black Advisory, Zeal Akaraiwe. Zeal, it's great to have you in the studio.
Thank you very much, Tolu.
All right, so a quick background before we get into this conversation. Now, the Nigerian government has inaugurated the Open Treasury Portal with the hope of making public the daily Treasury statements on how monies that come into government coffers are spent. The Executive Secretary of the Nigeria Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative, Waziri Adio, made the disclosure in a series of tweets. He said that with the launch of the Open Treasury Portal by President Muhammadu Buhari, all MDAs are to publish daily reports of payments from 5 million naira, monthly budget performance, quarterly financial statements, and annual financial statements prepared in compliance with the International Public Sector Accounting Standards. Now, in addition, he also said that the Accountant General of the Federation will publish on a daily basis inflows and outflows into the nation's treasury. All the reports are to be published within stipulated deadlines, and the portal will be open to and can be accessed by all Nigerians. So on the surface of it, it sounds like a fantastic thing. You had a public sector, civil society organization like Budget that was very excited about this news. And people have been asking the Nigerian government for many years now to be more accountable and transparent with how money comes in and how it goes out. So just hearing about it, what are your initial thoughts about this open treasury?
I think it's an amazing development. I think it's really crucial for any responsible government or democracy to be not just transparent, but accountable. So this is actually one step. This is the transparency is a massive step in ensuring accountability. Before this, we had little or no information. Yeah. You had to dig and look, actually go searching very diligently to find any information regarding government expenditure. But once this is implemented, it makes it very transparent. And I think this is a massive step in the right direction.
Okay, so additional to this is the directive also mandates that the Office of the Accountant General to publish monthly fiscal accounts within 14 days of the end of the month, detailing the fiscal performance of the Federation in terms of revenue receipts from all collecting agencies and payments out of the Federation account. So one of the big questions I've heard in conversation about this is that aren't these ministries, departments, and agencies, MDAs, meant to be publishing this information regularly themselves on their own websites?
Yes, they're meant to.
But so you answered that very quickly, which leads me to say, are they doing that?
So let's put it like this. I like this initiative in that by the government doing this from the federal perspective, what it means is that they are aware it ought to be done, which is a completely different issue from we've told them to do it and they didn't do it. So this ought to be done, and they are now emphasizing and ensuring, I'm hoping they will ensure that it gets done, and I'm hoping that there will be a penalty if it doesn't get done. Now, it sounds extremely tedious when you tell an MDA that has so much responsibility to give this kind of information on a daily basis. However, with tech, it's very, very easy, and a lot of institutions I know already have this tech where straight from your bank statements, the portal gets updated so that there's no manual intervention. So it's not as tedious as it sounds. If they initiate the right technology, then it becomes very transparent. Now, the other question, which is, what then does the public do with this information? Exactly.
But before we get to that, let's also talk about the corruption aspect of things. With Nigerians, there have been many conversations about inflated projects, projects past due. Then you also have situations where contractors at times will say they have not been given all their mobilization fee. Do we think a portal such as this, especially coming from a country like Nigeria, can help start the government, any administration, start getting a handle on the issue of corruption within the government circle?
Yes, absolutely. Whatever you do regarding corruption in terms of financial corruption and fraud, transparency makes it significantly more difficult. The more transparent you are, the more questions that get asked, the more scrutiny there is, the more difficult it is to do things with impunity. Now, we also need to develop a certain level of intelligence to ring fence the loopholes. There would always be loopholes, but as long as we are going transparent, it becomes significantly more difficult to do things as we've been doing before. Okay. It's a step in the right direction either way.
So let's get back to your question. What is the expectation of what Nigerians are meant to do with this?
I believe I asked you that question.
Yes, but I'm not the expert. That's why you're here.
Yeah, so this thing is a lot of, because we've seen a lot of information come out into the public domain on different issues, and the manner in which the average Nigerian disseminates or interprets and consumes information, in my opinion, is suboptimal. So I'm hoping that professionals, especially agencies like budget, that this is their core mandate for existence, would take this information and translate it into a language that makes sense. Because somebody's going to wake up and, from a poverty-stricken mentality, see an MDA spend 10 million a day, 300 million a month, 3.6 billion a month, and start calculating how many children that would feed. You know, and it's as much as we need to feed children, if that MDA's responsibility is something else, we need to be able to project their expenditure in line with the purpose of the MDA. Is that expenditure responsible? Is it transparent? Is it in the direction it should be in? Those are the discussions we should be having, not so much the volume, because we need to spend a lot. There's no doubt about it.
Yes, very true.
If somebody wakes up, if somebody wakes up and decides to spend 200 million on a lunch, lunch for a meeting or something, then clearly that's going to pick up a lot of scrutiny. But those are things that I think specialized agencies and specialized institutions should take that information and then periodically break it down to what it means. Because on a day-to-day basis, releasing it, very few people will go every day and look at it.
And it's a download thing, so you also have to sort of think about data cost as well. So the Minister of Finance, Zainab Ahmed, who also is very excited about this, apparently said that the full implementation of the program by all MDAs is expected latest by the end of 3 months. So they're giving the MDAs 3 months to sort of fall into line with this. And she urged Nigerians to use the portal to keep themselves informed on the country's finances and hold public office holders accountable. Do you think in the long run, if we say they're giving 3 months for the MDAs to sort of catch up to speed, and you can see the website there as well as the tweets from Waziri Adio, do you think Nigerians are going to take this up? They're going to move forward with this? They're going to sort of take up the baton that government has given them this? Because we're also worried, this is a website, you can count the number of people who visit, you'll be able to see if Nigerians in the next 3 to 4 months are actively going to this website and sort of consuming the information that the federal government is putting out.
I don't think I don't think that the usage of the website should be a monitor for anything. I'll give an example. The National Bureau of Statistics releases important data.
That will also end up here.
Not everybody understands the data, right? So if you check the downloads, it may not be that much, but people take it out dissect it and use it.
Okay,
now
sure.
This is specialized data that's not needed
by
everybody. Yes, you may have just 500 downloads a month, but one of those downloads may disseminate the data to 20,000 people. And the data is used to take decisions. Data is not just for consumption so that we know. It's not just for awareness and information. It's also for decision making. So if we see a trend, we can therefore project that if this agency has done this over the last 3 months or 6 months, we can project what will happen. So it's for decision making. So if this, I would be very shocked from a transparency and accountability perspective if anybody says because a lot of people are not downloading, therefore there's no use for it. I won't think they will go that direction at all.
So let's take this down to the next level of government in Nigeria, and that's the states. Now, this is a development that is being done by the federal government in Nigeria, but there are also accountability and transparency issues with the state government and local government in the country. Now, states have also been encouraged to imitate the federal government, and my guest is already sighing. States have also been encouraged to imitate the federal government by bringing on board their own websites such as this to also promote transparency in their fiscal and financial transactions. So far, only 10 states in Nigeria have signed up for the Open Government Partnership, while 26 states have indicated absolutely no interest in running what's we would call a transparent government. What do you think about that, given the Open Government Partnership, that's an international thing, and how most Nigerian states sort of operate in a very opaque, veiled manner when it comes to finances?
I'm calming myself down. So I have a view, and my view is very simple. We have a law, and the law states that at no level of governance can anyone spend money without a budget being appropriated into law. Now, you would assume that those who set up the law made the assumption that if I had to pass into law my expenditure, it only makes sense that after spending, I give account.
Yes. Whether it was fully spent, partially spent.
What I spent on, it's just expected. It's just a natural progression that if you spend money, you must give account. Now, it's all that a responsible, or rather a government that claims to be responsible would pass expenditure into law, at the end of the expenditure period, see no need and not even feel obligated to come back and give account. And yet people will pass more expenditure. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever to me. So since we have refused to take this on sensibly, the minimum I would expect is that a law be passed that says you can't pass a budget, you can't spend any money unless you pass a budget, and a new budget cannot be passed until you
reconcile the previous one.
Yes, it's a stand. I mean, if you're listed on the Nigerian Stock Exchange, you must give account to your shareholders. Governance is the same thing. After every period, I can't see how anybody runs government in any form that is slightly responsible and does not feel an obligation to give account on money you spent.
I think it's only time that will tell how Nigerian states will react to this, and if the Nigerian citizen themselves can put pressure on their states to bear in terms of being more fiscally transparent and accountable. So we'll see how this runs. We will check up on this in the next 3 months to see how MDAs in Nigeria are faring, and of course, if they're falling in line. The website is open. I can see it's in front of me. It's opentreasury.gov.nigeria. You can go there, and it goes back to 2018. They've already listed out to about 2025, and there are daily reports from all the ministries, departments, and agencies across Nigeria that are available for Nigerians to track. The OAGF, and that's the Office of the Accountant General of the Federation, will also publish payments of at least 10 million naira, outlining the MDA responsible, the beneficiary, the purpose, and the amount of each payment. It is the MDAs that will publish 5 million naira and above. So let's see how this plays out. Our next conversation after this quick timeout keeps us in Nigeria, and that's a conversation on visa on arrival. The country's president was speaking in Egypt when he announced very freely that visa on arrival will be granted to all Africans from January 2020. My guest stays with us, and we continue the conversation right after this. Nigeria's President Muhammadu Buhari has announced that all Africans wishing to travel to Nigeria will now be able to get a visa on arrival. He made the announcement in a meeting of African leaders on Wednesday that it was part of a commitment to ensuring freedom of movement on the continent. Now, citizens of countries belonging to the regional group, the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, already have a visa-free access to Nigeria. But this step taken by the president will mean other visitors need not fill out paperwork before they arrive. I was doing some prepping with you and having conversations, and you told me at the end of the day you had a lot more questions about this than sort of having answers. So yes, let's see what we can get to. In perspective, looking at this in terms of AFTA and also in terms of regional and continental integration and the conversations that we've had about Africans and the free movement of Africans, this is a good thing. Do we agree on that? On the surface of that?
Yes.
So what is the question? Where do your questions come in now? Because I have my own. So the president has announced this, meant to take off January 2020. We've seen official spokespeople for the president reiterate it as well. What do we think is happening?
Well, it depends on very many things. So there are pros and there are cons. In terms of optics, it's
a good look,
especially after closing your borders. In terms of optics, it's a pro. When you think about it deeply and you think about one of the reasons given for shutting the borders is to prevent armed militants from outside the country coming in, and then 2 months later you open the borders for them to come in visa-free. It then begins to...
Armed militants need visas, really?
No, but the point is, they used to smuggle themselves in, and we shut the borders to keep them out. Now you've given them visa-free access, which means they don't even need to apply to come in. So I'm wondering, and again, for me as a Nigerian, this is very good optics.
Yeah.
I'm hoping other African countries reciprocate. They are not obligated to, but I'm hoping that they do. But for us here, I'm just hoping it works. We've had, visa on arrival prior to now, whether you're African or not. I've had a few visitors who went through that process, and in reality, it was not a visa on arrival.
It leaves a lot to be desired.
It was a visa issuance on arrival, i.e., you apply long before you've done the paperwork, exactly. So if that has all been tidied up now, then is this a visa on arrival, which I hope it is, as opposed to a visa-free access? There's a slight difference.
Yes, there's actually a very obvious difference to that. But you also talk about reciprocity.
Yes.
And that's one of the issues we saw just a few months ago with something that happened with the United States and Nigeria in terms of visa fees. And the US had said they've been having these conversations with the Nigerian government. So this is Nigeria taking a lead on this. We do have a few African countries that are already doing something similar. But when we look at integration across the African continent and trade and finance and business, this is a good thing.
It is. I mean, all in days, I don't see a downside to this. So it either leaves us as we are or it's positive. So there is no reason not to do it. I mean, when we've started implementing, if we see pitfalls or loopholes, we can plug them. But all in all, in terms of integration, in terms of African movement and trying to unify the entire African continent, as we've been talking about for a very long time, this is a step in the right direction. So
let me go back to something you've mentioned. Nigeria's land borders remain closed, and it seems they may be closed for the foreseeable future, according to the president, who says until he's satisfied that the neighbors of Nigeria are doing what the Nigerian government is concerned about, he won't open them. So those borders are closed. And that also means that those in Nigeria who are sending goods outside of the country and those trying to bring goods have been affected. Then you open other borders, because visa on arrival could be at the land borders, it could be at the airport. It's just trying to juxtapose those situations, almost see the two sides of the same coin, literally.
Yeah, which is what I was saying. Is it visa on arrival or visa-free access? I'm not really sure which one it is. I'm hoping it's visa on arrival, which means that you still have to go through some documentation process. It just so happens that you do it at the border. If it's visa-free, like if you know with with ECOWAS, it's visa-free. So I could just jump in a plane and go to some other West African country and it's good. That's visa-free access. In terms of controlling, like you said, the land borders and the illegal immigrations into the country, I don't know what the controls on, because we have that issue. We've had that issue for years regarding elections, regarding voting register, regarding arms and ammunition coming in, the people that bring it in, all those portals. So I hope they have this aspect
handled.
Thoroughly handled, yes.
Okay, so quickly taking the tweet from President Muhammadu Buhari, and he said Nigeria is committed to supporting the free movement of Africans within Africa. Yesterday at the Aswan Forum in Egypt, I announced that in January 2020, we will commence issuance of visas at the point of entry into Nigeria to all persons holding passports of African countries. So just very quickly, as we wrap things up on this, those businessmen, African businessmen who've been looking to get into Africa, I've had people who do the visa on arrival and has not been a very easy, smooth, or desirable situation. Do we also expect to see the government trying to tighten how this is done? It's meant to be done online. There are times you go to the website and you simply cannot make payments. You simply cannot even access the website. So if this is happening January 2020, do we also expect the government to make sure they streamline the things to make it easier?
I think it's taken for granted. I mean, it's not such a technological difficulty.
Yeah.
I've been to a country, visa on arrival, you scan your passport. It works like an ATM machine. You scan your passport, you put in your details, it prints out a slip, and that's it. You're done. You pay with your card. It takes all of 3 or 4 minutes. If we can implement stuff like that, then this would be a breeze.
All right, Zeal Akaraiwe, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Toby.
We look forward to having you back. All right, so we'll wrap things up very quickly with NC4 to watch, which takes us quickly to Namibia, where the country has set aside $1 billion for power supply. The government set aside 15 billion Namibian dollars for generation and supply of power in the country. Morocco, Turkey pledged to boost economic cooperation. Moroccan Foreign Minister Nasser Bourita and his visiting Turkish counterpart pledged to further strengthen cooperation in the economic and commercial fields. MTN to defend its views on data prices. This story from South Africa is heating up. The MTN group has announced it will defend its views on lower data prices before a competition tribunal if the competition watchdog refers the case to a tribunal. And finally, Rwanda's GDP growth surges in Q3 2019. The country has shot up in the third quarter of the year, lifted by improved performance in manufacturing, construction, and services. That's as much as we can take on this edition of Business Edge. As always, thank you so much for joining us. Up next, there goes, it's a Friday. I'm just trying to get into the weekend ahead of you. Up next is news at the top of the hour right here on News Central. Until next time, I'm Tolulokwe Adelaru Balogun.